Welcome, everybody. This is Jane Patrick. We're here celebrating Spinning and Weaving Week, which is always the first week in October. We wanted to celebrate this year because we couldn't get together, do all the things we like to do in Spinning and Weaving Week, which is spin and weave together, do projects, demonstrate at the art museum, things like that. So we decided to have a virtual Spinning and Weaving Week this year. So we're having a weave along and a spin along. We're going to be introducing and interviewing some of our favorite weavers. So I hope you'll join us all week long. You can find the details at schachtspindle.com. So today it gives me great pleasure to introduce Anu Bhatia. She's this fabulous weaver. I'm just such a fan. And she lives in Fort Collins, Colorado, where she has a studio where she likes to teach, but of course now that's not happening in person. But the reason I wanted to talk to Anu is because she is a teacher and she's trained in education, but she's also a student. So she's continually learning and advancing in her craft. And so I think that's interesting, and I want to talk about that today. So welcome, Anu.
You're too kind.
So let's start with what attracted you to weaving in the first place?
Okay, I thought about it, and clearly there are two different distinct chapters in my life. One which started in India, where I grew up in Delhi, and then to study textiles and clothing, which is like equivalent to design and merchandising here. More textile technology, scientific side of the fibers, everything. So I learned the theory in India, but the practical I learned here. It's surprising that I got all the training, all theoretically down in India as my coursework, as part of my coursework, but never touched a handloom there. I knew everything. So when I came here, fast forward the story like 20, 22 years, and here I am working at a yarn store, local yarn store here, and I decided to take a weaving class. First I tried tapestry, which somehow maybe the timing was not right, or maybe whatever the circumstances might be, it didn't click at that time. Come forward to 2014, I decided to make a scarf for my dad. Many things went wrong with that project, but I was completely hooked to weaving with one project. And the loom was my favorite at that time. It was a Schacht Pup LT 4-shaft loom on which I did my first project. I wanted a loom immediately. I wanted to own a loom. Then came into picture another enabler of mine who sold me a baby wool. I think it was built in 94 or something, but I wanted it. Without even checking the loom, I said, I want it. So it started, I think you can say it started back in 80s, but that was the theory part. The practical part started in 2014 when I was done with my all raised my daughter. She went to college. Everything else was a secondary thing, and I could devote time to weaving. And there I was. And now I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I think it's interesting because we see a lot of people entering the weaving field when their children leave home, because now they have time. So maybe they wove before they had children or families when they were young, and then they left it for many, many years. And then once they're free, they're able to either start learning or re-enter the field again. So that's great.
Left the textile and the fiber arts piece ever. I continued here. I got my design and merchandising degree again in the US. So I was always sticking with it. And then I worked for the yarn store instead of teaching after I finished my PhD to teach textiles, historic textiles or textile technology. But I decided to work at the yarn store. So kind of stayed hands-on kind of a thing that attracted me to all of fiber arts. I mean, In India, people don't weave actually as a hobby or as a craft.
Mhm.
It's an industry by itself. And people are surprised when I say to them, in my Indian friends, that I weave, and they are like, "What do you do?" Because people just don't do it as a household hobby kind of a thing. It's a proper industry there.
Right. So people, weave. I think that's true in a lot of places in the world that people weave or spin as their livelihood. Right.
Yes, it's a livelihood, but not as a hobby ever.
Yeah.
Anybody who saw the loom or even touched a loom, a hand loom. So when I got my first one, I was all goo goo gaga over it. It's like this is my thing, and this is mine. And then came you and other people in the picture, Barry, and from one loom to two looms, and two looms to three and four. Then I have a studio now. I stopped counting actually after that.
They have a way of multiplying. So I know you have a background in education, right? So, and you're also teaching weaving. So how did you use your training, or did you find your training helpful when you became a weaving teacher?
That was the plan. So when I didn't teach in a university or any other place, and I wanted to do hands-on stuff, and I started formulating my classes just by example. The first aspect that I always incorporate in my teaching is there are certain goals. I mean, even if it's a beginner class, what is the goal? What do you want to achieve out of it? So that's for one. The other thing I keep in mind is keeping the project up to the level of the learner, because I do private classes. I don't never do a group teaching, especially for beginners.
Mm-hmm.
We learned early on that every individual is different and they have a different way of learning or teaching. My first student who came, she was a left-handed person. And whatever I was saying to her, she said, it just doesn't make sense to me. So I was kind of doing a headstand for her to be able to explain to her. So the thing is, um, every project you have to see your beginner, your weaver who wants to do something and set it up for a success so that they feel successful. Setting them up for a failure, kind of giving them a very hard project, it happens sometimes, like, because you kind of overestimate the capabilities or sometimes underestimate. So both things go hand in hand. By giving them something that they feel successful about is the basically the goal, because then you feel motivated enough to go move on with the next project, or you may decide not to pursue it ever again. But the thing is, if you feel successful, you want to do more.
Right.
That's
Exactly. Yeah. Right.
giving them small goals, and then building my classes one on top of other, so they will be able to use what they learned in the first class and they built on it. So kind
Mm-hmm.
of a good way of building classes, uh, not doing too many else per project. In the first project, give them a 400 thread project, and then
Right.
after.
Right. So, as you know, in your teaching experience, what do you think, where do you find, is there like a statement you can make where you feel like there's certain things about students, they need certain kind of encouragement?
Um, I mean, they come with a picture that when they see a beautiful textiles, can I make that? I mean, the first question is like, am I able to do it? I mean, I can do it, and how much time it will take? These are tough questions for me, which I really can't answer. They see a beautiful overshot towels, and they said, can I make those? Not today. Maybe down the road, but yeah, there are many things that come before that. So I don't want to discourage them. But eventually, you might be able to make those, but there are so many things that come before that. Learning to measure the warp, even if they're not designing, I give them the design, but learning to measure a small warp and then adding two colors, or playing with colors, those kind of things. Those are small steps. So when I explain it to them, sometimes it's kind of hard. And I think um, for some people, measuring the warp, they take it really hard. For some people, it's the heddles
Mm-hmm.
into the way, or overall warping thing. It's very overwhelming experience for them to, from starting with the measuring the yarn to going to the loom, which part they skip actually altogether. When they come, they will be weaving. That's what they think.
Well, I mean, so I think when people are beginners, they think the warping is like the very worst part. Like that's the torture before they get to do the fun. But I don't know if I felt that when I first started weaving. But I've always liked warping.
The same for me. I tell them, it's like, are you crazy? I love the rhythm of measuring the warp, um, the designing part, putting warp on the loom. It's all kind of musical, therapeutic to me. And I tell them, you'll get to like it eventually. Otherwise, you'll be in trouble.
Right. You have to do the warping. So you might as well like it, right?
Exactly. They kind of skip that part when they come into the studio. It's like, okay, I'll be weaving today. No, maybe 2 classes down the road. Not.
Yeah.
That's
Well, I
fun.
think one of the best things that I had when I first learned to weave was we had to warp the loom every week.
That's wonderful.
And it was an 8-week class. So by the time you were done with 8 weeks, you'd already done warping 8 times. I mean, they were small warps, not that many ends, but you still were going through the process. So I got it by then.
Yeah, I think I really like that idea.
Yeah.
Making them warp the loom so that it gets ingrained in your memory.
Right, up here. So what, when you talk about warping, you don't mind warping, but what part of the weaving process do you love the most?
Me, from designing to counting threads and deciding the set, I spend most time on those steps because if even if I have used that yarn, sometime a weave structure it dictates to choose otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
some other set or something. So just figuring out what I'm gonna do, and the planning part, and then up to the stage when the warp goes on the loom, and then I start weaving, and everything comes out perfect.
Yeah.
No cross threads, no mistakes in threading. It's like Yahoo for me.
I mean, when you think about it, if you have a warp of 400 threads and you don't have a threading error, that's good, right?
I like that, and I try to achieve that. Cross threads, sometimes if the yarn is too fine, sometimes a few cross threads, but I try to achieve no threading mistakes. That's always my goal. So up till then, when it starts to come out really perfect, I start to lose interest. I know that.
So I have this technique I use to thread so I don't make errors. So I divide my threading up in sections.
Mm-hmm.
And then I count the number of petals in that one section. And then I thread that section. And then if I get to if I'm done with that section and I have a leftover heddle, I got a problem, or I don't have enough heddles. So then I have to go figure out the problem. So how do you thread so you don't have mistakes?
Okay, first of all, I always insist to my students counting twice the heddles according to the design, how many heddles you need. They try to skip that. I said no. That's the one thing, because you can find your first of all, you will have enough heddles that you need to know that for certain structures you need more heddles on certain shafts.
Sure.
That's the idea. But the second thing is you will find your mistakes quickly if you run out on one shaft, or I mean, you know what you did, kind of guess accordingly. So I count, but I have another thing. I have the eVivit app on my iPad,
Mm-hmm.
the threading tracker and the treadle tracker. Sometimes I have colored warp and I have certain colors because when I have colored different colors in the warp, I wind same colors together. So I have to grab three of this and two of the red, and so that way. So I weave it. I use the threading tracker twice then. When I'm putting it, I'm a front to back um, warper. I like that better. I have learned both, but I like front to back better. So when I'm threading my reed, actually, threading tracker helps me, two reds, one blue, one green. So I use that and
Mhm.
it helps. And then I'm threading my heddles and I go inch by inch and I go check and then put a knot.
Mhm.
That's how I go. But I use I weave it now because I'm using finer threads more and more.
Mhm.
It helps.
Okay, so it's low tech, high tech.
Since I design in Fiberworks on my laptop, and in a WIF file, these two programs can talk to each other.
Mhm.
Then I send it to my iPad, and when I'm sitting down, no music at that time. When I'm warping, when I'm putting the thread in the heddle, I want to concentrate, and it's really a wonderful app to do the threading, use the threading tracker.
Great.
Use
So
it.
did you have any weaving you wanted to show us today?
Um, okay, something from India first.
Okay, great.
What gives me the background of like, okay, these are some of my saris that I pulled out. Silk, even plain, color combinations where I get my inspiration. Beautiful, you can see the jacquard weaving.
Mm-hmm. Yes, just like the light was right. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, just some color combinations here. You can see where I get my inspiration and something comes out and it takes me back to India.
Yeah.
These are more collectibles now because I hardly wear once or twice a year. Weaving wise, I wanted to show you this piece, and I always love it. I mean, though it was my first piece published in Handwoven, November December 2017, I still look at it and it gives me a smile.
Yeah.
My first published project. And somebody wanted this scarf. I had to make twice again to sell it. This is the original piece. My husband didn't let me sell it. He
So hold it still for a second so we can see it better. So it looks like a twill.
It's a twill block.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
It's 1331 twill on my Schacht. But somehow when I wasn't I wasn't thinking of sending it. I was just weaving it actually. And it came off the loom and I could see it published in Handwoven. So after I made it.
It's great. I love it.
But the next piece is my peacock inspired Mayuri, which was in Handwoven this year, March, April.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of shows the feathers, and then the treadling changes, and then you see it's crisscrossing more.
Mm-hmm. I
So
love that.
the silk from Greenway, Susan DuBois provided the silk, and
It's beautiful.
it's I'm
You can
proud of
really
it.
see the sheen on it.
Silk is my favorite fiber,
Yeah.
and cotton. I love cotton.
Mhm.
So what else I can tell
That's
you?
it for show and tell. Well, thank you for joining us. I look forward to seeing more of your projects in Handwoven,
Thank you.
and hopefully you'll be back in your studio teaching very soon, and we'll see you hopefully down at Schacht one of these days.
Soon I'm picking up my loom. My
Okay.
mighty.
All right.
Thank you so much,
Bye,
Jane.
Anu.
For the
Take
opportunity.
care.
I appreciate it. Bye bye.